The longing for light is the longing for consciousness. The word belief is a difficult thing for me. I don't believe. I must have a reason for a certain hypothesis. Either I know a thing, and then I know it, I don't need to believe it. An old man who cannot bid farewell to life appears as feeble and sickly as the young man who is unable to embrace it. One could say, with a little exaggeration, that the persona is that which in reality one is not, but which oneself as well as others think one is. Nature does not deceive or conceal, but reveals. People are never helped in their suffering by what they think for themselves, but only by revelation of a wisdom greater than their own. It is this which lifts them out of their distress. Because the European does not know his own unconscious, he does not understand the East and projects it into everything he fears and despises in himself. The most dangerous things in the world are immense accumulations of human beings who are manipulated by only a few heads. Only by discovering alchemy have I clearly understood that the unconscious is a process and that ego's rapport with the unconscious and its contents initiate an evolution, more precisely, a real metamorphosis of the psyche. The squaring of the circle is a stage on the way to the unconscious, a point of transition leading to a goal lying as yet unformulated beyond it. It is one of those paths to the center. Freedom stretches only as far as the limits of our consciousness. Sometimes a tree tells you more than can be read in books. Much of the evil in the world is due to the fact that man in general is hopelessly unconscious. Good does not become better by being exaggerated, but worse, and a small evil becomes a big one through being disregarded and repressed. Words are animals, alive with a will of their own. One of the main functions of formalized religion is to protect people against a direct experience of God. Consciousness succumbs all too easily to unconscious influences, and these are often truer and wiser than our conscious thinking. The spirit is the life of the body seen from within, and the body the outward manifestation of the life of the spirit, the two being really one. Sensation tell us a thing is. Thinking tell us what it is this thing is. Feeling tells us what this thing is to us. Music is the application of sounds to the canvas of silence. We are born at a given moment, in a given place, and, like vintage years of wine, we have the qualities of the year and of the season of which we are born. Astrology does not lay claim to anything more. Dreams are symbolic in order that they cannot be understood, in order that the wish, which is the source of the dream, may remain unknown. Thank God I'm not a Jungian. From the viewpoint of analytic psychology, the theater, aside from any aesthetic value, may be considered as an institution for the treatment of the mass complex. The more uncertain I have felt about myself, the more there has grown up in me a feeling of kinship with all things. The symbols of the self arise from the depths of the body. Instinct is like nature herself, prodigiously conservative, and yet transcending her own historical conditions in her acts of creation. When you come to think about it, nothing has any meaning, for when there was nobody to think, there was nobody to interpret what happened. We do not know whether Hitler is going to found a new Islam. He is already on the way, he is like Muhammad. The emotion in Germany is Islamic, warlike and Islamic. They are all drunk with wild God. That can be the historic future. No man can change himself into anything from sheer reason, he can only change into what he potentially is. It is sad but unfortunately true that man learns nothing from history. A true symbol appears only when there is a need to express what thought cannot think or what is only divined or felt. Science has destroyed even the refuge of the inner life. What was once a sheltering haven has become a place of terror. The general function of dreams is to try to restore our psychological balance by producing dream material that re-establishes, in a subtle way, the total psychic equilibrium. One cannot live without inconsistency. It was most essential for me to have a normal life in the real world as a counterpoise to that strange inner world. My family and my profession remained the base to which I could return. The judgment of the intellect is, at best, only the half of truth. It is often tragic to see how blatantly a man bungles his own life and the lives of others yet remains totally incapable of seeing how much the whole tragedy originates in himself, and how he continually feeds it and keeps it going. The symbol in the dream has more the value of a parable. It does not conceal, it teaches. What usually has the strongest psychic effect on the child is the life which the parents have not lived. Every mother contains her daughter in herself, and every daughter her mother, and every mother extends backwards into her mother and forwards into her daughter. The creative process is a living thing, implanted, as it were, in the souls of men. People cannot stand too much reality. Paul hardly ever allows the real Jesus of Nazareth to get a word in. Shrinking away from death is something unhealthy and abnormal which robs the second half of life of its purpose. A man's hatred is always concentrated upon that which makes him conscious of his bad qualities. Our psyche is set up in accord with the structure of the universe, and what happens in the macrocosm likewise happens in the infinitesimal and most subjective reaches of the psyche. If only simplicity were not the most difficult of all things. It consists of watching objectively the development of any fragment of fantasy. My whole being was seeking for something still unknown which might confer meaning upon the banality of life. Modern man is sick because he is not whole. Meaninglessness inhibits fullness of life and is therefore the equivalent to illness. Meaning makes a great many things endurable, per aps everything. To the critical intelligence, nothing is left of absolute reality. No nation keeps its word. A nation is a big, blind worm, following what? Fate perhaps. A nation has no honor, it has no word to keep. He who looks without, dreams, he who looks within, awakes. Not nature, but the genius of mankind, has knotted the hangman's noose with which it can execute itself at any moment. An archetypal content expresses itself, first and foremost, in metaphors. To me dreams are part of nature, which harbors no intention to deceive but expresses something as best it can. A residual sea of symbols which is shared by all mankind, usually accessed through dreams or altered states, and from which cultures draw images on which to found their religions. Man positively needs general ideas and convictions that will give a meaning to his life and enable him to find a place for himself in the universe. Healing proceeds from the depths to the heights. Criticism can be effective when there is something that must be destroyed or dissolved, but it is capable only of harm when there is something to be built. The sure path can only lead to death. The man of today, who resembles more or less the collective ideal, has made his heart into a den of murderers, as can easily be proved by the analysis of his unconscious, even though he himself is not in the least disturbed by it. Psychiatrists classify a person as neurotic if he suffers from his problems in living, and as psychotic if he makes others suffer. My work as a psychoanalyst is to help patients recover their lost wholeness and to strengthen the psyche so it can resist future dismemberment. Primitive superstition lies just below the surface of even the most tough-minded individuals, and it is precisely those who most fight against it who are the first to succumb to its suggestive effects. Synchronistic events provide an immediate religious experience as a direct encounter with the compensatory patterning of events in nature as a whole, both inwardly and outwardly. The majority of my patients consisted not of believers but of those who had lost their faith. Even a happy life cannot be without a measure of darkness. Life calls us forth to independence, and anyone who does not heed this call because of childish laziness or timidity is threatened with neurosis. And once this has broken out, it becomes an increasingly valid reason for running away from life. The reason for such an unreasonable attitude with me is that I am not at all sure what will happen to me after death. I have good reasons to assume that things are not finished with death. Life seems to be an interlude in a long story. At times I feel as if I am spread out over the landscape and inside things, and am myself living in every tree, in the plashing of the waves, in the clouds and the animals that come and go, in the procession of the seasons. Every civilized human being, whatever his conscious development, is still an archaic man at the deeper levels of his psyche. The cinema, like the detective story, makes it possible to experience without danger all the excitement, passion and desirousness which must be repressed in a humanitarian ordering of life. Once upon a time men were possessed by devils. Now they are not less obsessed by ideas. I had to make a confession of faith in stone. That was the beginning of the tower, the house I built for myself at Bollingen. No concept is a carrier of life. Myth is more individual and expresses life more precisely than does science. Protection and security are only valuable if they do not cramp life excessively. Dreams are the facts from which we must proceed. A special ability means a heavy expenditure of energy in a particular direction, with a consequent drain from some other side of life. You can expect no influence if you are not susceptible to influence. Nothing is more repulsive than a furtively prurient spirituality. It is just as unsavory as gross sensuality. The angel personifies something new arising from the deep unconscious. And what shall we know of this life on earth after death? The dissolution of our time-bound form in eternity brings no loss of meaning. Rather, does the little finger know itself a member of the hand? The gods have become our diseases. Remember that the only God man comes in contact with is his own God, called spirit, soul and mind, or consciousness, and these three are one. Man is the mirror God holds up to himself, the sense organ with which he apprehends his being. What you call knowledge is an attempt to impose something comprehensible on life. One is always in the dark about one's own personality. One needs others to get to know oneself. Eternal truth needs a human language that alters with the spirit of the times. I find that all my thoughts circle around God like the planets around the sun, and are as irresistibly attracted by him. I would feel it to be the grossest sin if I were to oppose any resistance to this force. To make what fate intends for me my own intention. The whole nature of man presupposes woman, both physically and spiritually. His system is tuned into woman from the start, just as it is prepared for a quite definite world where there is water, light, air, salt, carbohydrates etc. I could well imagine that I might have lived in former centuries and there encountered questions I was not yet able to answer, that I had been born again because I had not fulfilled the task given to me. To become acquainted with oneself is a terrible shock. Error is just as important a condition of life's progress as truth. Everything psychic is pregnant with the future. Our intellect has created a new world that dominates nature, and has populated it with monstrous machines.